Greetings, welcome one and all to Beyond the Walls. I thank you for joining us and being a part of this community. We've now arrived at the 1-year anniversary of the lockdowns. A year ago, I was in Australia visiting the members of the church there and also kangaroos and other assorted Australians. That was a trip that was cut short when the Canadian Prime Minister called upon all Canadians to return, and there was actually a special flight that was arranged from Brisbane to Vancouver. And then I flew back here for a 2-week quarantine spent alone, where I celebrated, or rather I didn't celebrate, my 50th birthday. So we've all now had occasion to have birthdays and other anniversaries disrupted for a first time, and we're on track, unfortunately, to repeat the same circumstances for much of 2021. It was a year ago that this congregation suspended in-person gatherings. This has continued now for an entire year. Nothing like this has occurred in the 130 years since the congregation was reorganized in 1891. Much suffering has resulted, both directly and indirectly, as a result of the virus and as a result of the responses to the virus, both good and bad and mixed. Nevertheless, one thing that has emerged that is positive is this community. The ministry all of you have shared with one another as we build sacred community in support of all. I thank you for your part, for responding to the call. In the face of so much suffering, you may even feel guilt. Maybe you feel that you've had it relatively easy. And we all know that others have had experiences that are much worse than what any one of us has had. But you should also allow yourself to acknowledge what you've gone through and not give yourself the additional hardships through some kind of survivor guilt. There is more loss and more hardship ahead, but let us share the road and the burdens together as pilgrims in life's sacred journey. Let us now pull back and bring to mind the eternal perspective, the vision of that which is at once the source and the goal. Holy wisdom, love for love's own sake, goodness itself. May we discern these together as we seek this hour to hear God's guidance. And now to begin that, we go live to Midland, Ontario, where Mel Roach will read our call to worship. Mel, welcome to Beyond the Walls.
Thanks, John. Good morning. Our call to worship is taken from Doctrine and Covenants, section 162, verses 1b and 2b. Listen to the voice that echoes across the eons of time, and yet speaks anew in this moment. Listen to the voice, for it cannot be stilled, and it calls you once again to the great and marvelous work of building the peaceable kingdom, even Zion, on behalf of the one whose name you claim. Listen to its teachings and discover anew its principle. Do not yearn for times that are past, but recognize that you have been given a foundation of faithful service, even as you build a foundation for what is yet to be. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mel. We're dedicating our opening hymn to a friend we lost last year. Dale Luffman died not quite a year ago, and tomorrow is the anniversary of his birth. The hymn here, Lord, Make Us Instruments of Your Peace, is one that was played at Dale's funeral. Dale was certainly an instrument of peace, one of the towering figures in our movement, in our church. And on a personal note, he was just someone whose testimony and life and integrity helped bring me into this community and made me want to be a member of this church. And we also appreciate so much that Judy Luffman has been such a strong member of this community and every week shares her voice with the choir and has also provided other ministry. So please join with the Beyond the Walls Choir in singing our opening hymn number 364, Lord, Make Us Instruments.
Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let your love increase. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Lords of pride and prejudice shall cease. When we are your instruments of peace, where there is hatred, we will show your love. Where there is injury, we will never judge. Where there is striving, we will speak your peace to the people crying for release. We will be your instruments of peace. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let your love increase. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Walls of pride and prejudice shall cease. When we are your instruments of peace. Where there is blindness, we will pray for sight. Where there is darkness, we will shine your light. Where there is sadness, we will bear their grief. To the millions crying for release, we will be your instruments of peace. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let your love increase. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Walls of pride and prejudice shall cease. When we are your instruments of peace.
That was lovely. I want to thank Judy and everyone who shares their voice with the choir, making this ministry possible week after week. A special call out this week to Brenda Calthrop and Diana Vanderkar, who are both joining us for the first time from Grand Rapids and Flushing, Michigan, respectively. And now we continue back in Midland, Ontario, where Troy Roach will offer our invocation. Troy, it's wonderful to be seeing you.
And you as well, John, and hello to everyone. Invite us into prayer together. Loving and sustaining God, provider of all our cares, comforter of all our strife, in blindness before you, we release our needs, hurt, pride, and our all into the peace of your presence that connects us to each of the places where we gather from this day. Though we watch from isolated spaces, seeing unknown faces from far away, longing for the hugging embrace of those we know and miss dearly, help us to see our divine oneness in this moment. That the music, words, and prayers we hear individually are the same ones heard by everyone listening in a strange and interesting kind of unity. As we immerse into and participate with your Spirit throughout this service, may our global representation remind us of the variegated welfare of others around the world, illuminating concerns commonly invisible to our personal context, but very much a reality elsewhere. In the sorrows of such awareness, in the joy of hope instilled, let your grace wash over our imperfect hearts, melt away our assumptions and misgivings, bringing forth the humble child of our inner voice, leaving us wide open and prepared to renew your covenant with us. While we seek your face, your touch, your forgiveness, let us carry boldly in our minds the faces of all who seek that which seems out of reach: forgiveness, dignity, security, equality, freedom, and fairness. And that we share this desire with them. Then God, as empowered instruments of peace, refine us through the sacrament of these holy tune-ups, to be warmed up and at the ready to sow the notes of hope, healing, and compassion in harmony with your will and all of creation. Amen.
Thank you, Troy and Mike. For our peace lesson, we're pleased to welcome Brian Carwana, the director of the Encounter World Religion Center. Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in the world, and Brian's predecessor, the late J.W. Winland, founded a Discovery Week experience, bringing people together to be educated about the various world religions practiced here by our neighbors, and then to go out and actually encounter them in the various temples, gurdwaras, synagogues, mosques, churches, and other places of worship. The group began by camping out for a week in the basement gymnasium of our congregation's old church on Bathurst Street, but Brian has vastly expanded the program. We are very pleased to have Brian teach us about world religions and raise awareness of discrimination faced by religious minorities around the globe. And so now we go live to Guelph, Ontario, and say, hello, hi Brian, how are you?
Hi, John. Good. Thanks for having me. I want to begin with a slight apology. We could use stories of uplift given the situation we live in today, but today I'm going to talk about something dark. I apologize for that, but I hope you'll see that it's important. In the 1930s, Jews were slowly stripped of their rights in Nazi Germany. They were rounded up, then they were put in concentration or detainment camps, and of course we know how that ended. When we hear these stories now, we're often amazed that no one spoke up. Well, the truth is that this is happening again today. Specifically, it is happening in China, another powerful nation like Nazi Germany was in the 30s, where the government has detained somewhere north of 1 million Uyghurs. Uyghurs are both an ethnic minority, they're Turkic, and a religious one as they are Muslims. The Chinese state is seeking to strip them of both of those identities. They are rounded up, supposedly as possible Muslim terrorists, and put into what are called re-education camps. Detainees include grandparents. Crimes include things like prayer. The reports from the camps come from escapees, videos, and documents. It shows people being chained to beds, living in cells with caged windows, subjected to beatings, and many stories of rampant rape, as well as forced sterilization and medical experimentation. Those not arrested live in a police state. Mosques are closed down by the government for repairs that are never done. Many have been converted into cafes, some selling alcohol. If you enter a mosque, almost no one does anymore, you are registered, which might mean losing your job or your pension. Halal stores are closed for fear of universalizing halal food. I read stories of Uyghurs burning their own religious books at the cost of real personal pain. Many people are called in for health checks where their blood is taken, giving DNA markers, fingerprint samples are recorded, and they have their faces scanned. The state thus knows an ungodly amount on this minority, including your health, and if someone's parents aren't who they think they are. The state has employed technology in ways previously unknown. Cameras permeate the streets. A Globe and Mail reporter said he counted 28 cameras while he walked one block. The cameras connect to facial recognition technology, showing how you dress, what objects or books you're carrying, your location, of course, who you talk to, etc. They've also instituted a policy of mutual reporting so that you are supposed to report any Muslim observance. To enter into the truly obscene, 1 million Chinese from the dominant Han community have been imported for homestays, meaning they live in the houses with the Uyghurs for 6 days every few months. The state calls them relatives in a program called Pair Up and Become Family. They bring main ideas that the government says, and they all develop, according to the government, fellow feeling for one another. In many homes, the men are imprisoned, and the new relatives are males who share a bed with the Uyghur women. These state-imposed relatives must fill out forms like, are there any religious hangings on the walls? And if the forms are not positive enough, one is subjected to a home interview. What can we do? 3 things. First, consider writing your political representative about the genocide of the Uyghurs. 2, the Olympics are scheduled for China next winter. Ask your government to condemn China and to demand the games be moved. Consider writing the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, or the national version. There's a Canadian Olympic Committee and an American one. Third, tell others. Google an article and post it on social media or share it with your friends. The only thing these Uyghurs have is international pressure. They can't speak up, but we can, so let's do it.
Thank you, Brian. Sabemos que cada domingo cientos de personas como vos atraviesan las puertas virtuales de este espacio sagrado. Un espacio que no está confinado ni entre paredes ni atado a un solo lugar. La semaine dernière, certains d'entre vous nous ont dit où vous étiez en partageant sur Facebook et YouTube. Et aussi, certains d'entre vous m'ont envoyé un email pour nous dire où vous étiez la semaine dernière. With all that, our map maker, John Hamer, compiled all your locations and made these maps that we can see here on screen. And this is just a beginning. These are just snapshots of last week's service with many places in the United States, all across the United States and Canada, as well as some places in French Polynesia, Australia, and the Netherlands. But we know this is not everyone. We know there are more locations, more countries. So let's put everyone's thought on the map, okay? So if you haven't said, here I am, this is your chance today. A los amigos del Salvador, que yo sé que están ahí, de Colombia, de España, those of you in Germany and the UK, I saw you, so please say, here I am, so that we put your dot, because John's not busy enough, so he can make an updated version of this map. And thank you, as always, for coming together as the congregation Beyond the Walls. Thank you for clicking like and sharing this video, because with just one click, you're doing mission, helping us draw the circle wide, inviting everyone to Christ today. For that, I thank you. Por eso te doy las gracias. Pour cela, je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Leandro. And now we go live to Fergus, Ontario, where Amy and Eloise, both Unruh, will be giving our disciples' response and offertory prayer. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, John. We have been so very blessed this past year. We have been blessed to have technology ready at our fingertips to easily continue sharing and connecting when we must be physically apart. We have been blessed to be part of an incredible community of supportive, talented, and caring people. Thanks to this technology, the creative individuals who developed an easy-to-use peace lesson practice for children, and the ones who sparked interest in a ministry specifically for children and helped connect just the right people at a more local level in Ontario, we have begun providing ministry to our youngest peacemakers at a time when a question kept lingering: what about the children? The Children's Online Peace Book Club is a ministry that has allowed us to not only gather and connect in a time when we cannot be physically together, but also allows us to merge resources and reach children across a large geographical area, since distance is no longer a factor when we're talking about simply finding a comfortable spot in our own home and connecting to Zoom. In Ontario, I know that it can be challenging for individual congregations to even begin thinking about children's ministry when there might only be 1, 2, or just a small handful of children present. The online format of this ministry has allowed us to connect children who may be scattered across our regions and share together in learning and growing spiritually. In our case, we've been lucky to have formed a connection between two congregations, Guelph and LaSalle Road, and to just recently have expanded and welcomed children from across Canada East Mission to our little online book club. Personally, I love using children's picture books to teach and engage kids in thought and discussion, so this made the Peace Book appealing to me right away. The format of the book club is very simple. We greet one another, we share an ebook by sharing our screen and reading aloud. We ask a few discussion questions about the story. We take part in a short related mindfulness practice, and then we share any final thoughts and experiences with each other. I was pleasantly surprised that even in our first session back in November, the children were very engaged and shared a lot of interesting insight about the book and the topic that day. It has been a truly enriching experience, and I'm so grateful for all those who have had a hand in making it happen. In closing, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to share about this new project and ministry. I'm very excited to see where we go next and how it may grow and blossom as we look forward to the future. Our buildings may not be occupied, but we continue our important work thanks to your generous response. As always, we would ask that you continue to support your local congregations and worldwide missions so that together we can continue working towards Christ's mission, our mission. Please join us now in prayer.
Cher Seigneur, merci de ta présence, ton amour et ton soutien constant dans nos vies. Nous sommes bénis d'appartenir à une communauté, une famille bienveillante, chaleureuse et serviable. Nous te demandions de continuer à nous guider et d'être à nos côtés pour que nous puissions poursuivre ton travail, ta mission. Tu es si généreux avec nous, tes enfants. Aide-nous à démontrer cette même générosité à travers nos actions et nos contributions. Amen.
Amen. Merci, Eloise. Thank you, Amy. And now we go live to Calgary, Alberta, where Cindy Larsen will read our lectionary. Welcome to Beyond the Walls, Cindy.
Thank you, John. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. The scripture reading, the lectionary reading this morning is from Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Thank you, Cindy. And now we go to Independence, Missouri, where Apostle Art Smith will give our communion message. Welcome, Art. We are so pleased that you're able to be with us on Beyond the Walls.
There I am.
There you are.
Thank you, John. It's great to be able to be here and to get to be heard today. So we've spent time these last months often exploring the origin stories of the Hebrew people. And I love that we can sit here in 2021, connected to each other through integrated circuits, Zoom, and Leandro's magic, and discover meaning in the ancient texts of the Hebrew people. My prayer today related to this special text is really the same prayer I have in mind on every Communion Sunday. It's that through this experience of focusing on the Exodus stories and on the communion, that we may be guided again towards freedom, and that we may go deeper in learning to live together in harmony with God and with each other. May we be drawn anew for this age into God's beautiful justice of love, mercy, and compassion, and out of all those things that imprison. All around the church, and particularly in Canada right now, I'm encouraging us to focus on fundamentals. Doctrine and Covenants calls it what matters most, as we try to understand where God is guiding us as a church. We honor our core values and that which is most important. And at the same time, we need to recognize that responding to this time and this place requires us to be open to what is being born and to the future that is emerging. So it's a good Sunday to delve into the 10 Commandments. They're foundational. But be careful with the 10 Commandments. We live in a world that misuses foundational things from long ago. People sometimes act as if these 10 commandments can be ripped out of their context and applied literally and without grace. Always remember Jesus' example when it comes to biblical interpretation. You have heard it said, but I say to you. The Jesus of the Gospels seems to have understood that foundational things all emerged in a context. Ignoring that, and in a feat of irony, people have made an idol out of the commandment that begs people not to make idols. As we're discerning the future of the church, remember that idolatry has always been a problem for religious folk. We religious people have often been tempted to put frivolous things in place of God's true justice. We so easily end up worshiping the religion itself or the church with her traditions and structures rather than God's goodness and fairness for all. Looking at the 10 Commandments, we can marvel about how way back then, good guidance on problems recurring to this very day was already emerging. But we do have to look for the light that applies to our day. There are aspects of these texts that simply mirror the prejudices of the time. For example, back then, according to the story, when God addressed the people through Moses, God spoke only to the men. The 10 Commandments were not given to women. Women were mentioned, but only as property of the men. They are not to be coveted. In that day and age, people didn't understand that God had anything to say to women about themselves coveting or stealing. If we haven't learned it yet, now in the month of March dedicated to advancing the position of women around the world, may we learn to stop simply applying ancient texts that mirror the misogyny of the surrounding culture. There are things we've learned in the intervening years. Of course, there are things we haven't learned. When I step back and look at the 10 Commandments in context, above all, I see a message of divine grace. What do you mean, Art? We're talking about the 10 Commandments. These are laws, not grace, right? Yes, I know. But the overarching message of this text is grace. Notice how the text begins, as Cindy read it so well, with a reminder that the God who is speaking is the God who has already liberated them. Notice how the book of Exodus does not go. The book could have been ordered differently. The 10 Commandments could have been given to Abraham or to Isaac. The slaves could have been liberated as some sort of quid pro quo. Since you obeyed so well, I'm going to free you from bondage in Egypt. But no, the God we're getting to know in Exodus is a merciful God of love and compassion, a God who is particularly drawn towards the lowly and oppressed. That grace is just part of God's nature. That's like the communion that we take today. We don't have to do anything to earn it. It is freely given to us to help us reconnect with God and with each other. In the same way, these commandments are not in any way given as a condition for receiving God's love. They have already been liberated. God is grace, even in the Old Testament. And as we discern the future of the church, we must strive for it to be a vessel of grace for all communities of people in Canada and for those in every context. Sometimes we flinch at the parts of these 10 Commandments where it says that God is jealous and will get angry if we don't obey. But even those parts of the reading should not be understood outside of God's grace. Those verses show that God cares so profoundly about us that our behavior has an impact on God. God feels it when we stray from love of God and love of neighbor. This is a part of God's grace. The idea that the God of all creation, of the universe, is vulnerable to our behavior is all part of painting this picture of a compassionate God who feels us. God wants to be a partner, and when we don't do our part, the divine self is vulnerable. When the text talks about God punishing generations of people, remember that it takes generations to recover from political movements based on hate and justice and injustice. Warnings that are personified in such scriptures have more truth than we might like to admit. And be careful when it says that we should fear God. In this context, this is about honoring and respecting rather than being terrorized. We should profoundly honor amazing grace, compassion, and mercy. That's what the Hebrew means when it talks about fearing God. At the same time, pay attention to the little bits in the text that tend to get left out when we're making lists of the 10 Commandments. Details can be very important. We repeat, keep the Sabbath holy. Keeping the Sabbath holy, of course, meant remembering that people deserve the dignity of rest. But the punch is in the details, where we learn that it's not just powerful male citizens who deserve rest. The text lists vulnerable people who need to be included in our mercy too. Men and women, children, boys, girls, slaves, and even the foreigners living among us. Be careful about skipping over these parts. At this point, the text isn't just mirroring the prejudices of the surrounding culture. This might be seen as God's guidance shining through. It's interesting that we teach the 10 Commandments to children, even though these laws are really pretty adult. Childish meanings miss the point. We use the 10 Commandments to teach children not to swear. But the law is tackling an adult problem. The law is about misrepresenting God and God's nature to justify our own human sin and prejudice. When we use God or the church to justify our politics or our hate, that is using God's name in vain. People used God to justify slavery. And now we use God to punish people of different sexual orientations or gender identities, or even different spiritualities. Using God to justify things outside of God's truly compassionate justice is prohibited. This law calls us to honor God, but it's convenient for us to overlook that and to make it about not cursing. There's a parallel law related to bearing false witness about our fellow human. We aren't supposed to misrepresent God or our neighbor. I think of this one a lot on social media. All those posts demeaning categories of people based on unfair generalizations of character or motives, the stuff of so many memes, is often about bearing false witness. Stealing is another commandment whose meaning we diminish. The law about stealing is related to the law about coveting, and it's all related to the journey that the people of Israel have been on. In the wilderness, they were shown how God wanted them to live together, gathering just enough manna for them and their family to live on for a day. Nobody was to gather more than they needed to hoard or to stockpile. So the commandments about coveting and stealing have little to do with protecting personal property rights in a world of wild extremes of wealth and poverty. When we tolerate these wild extremes, Canadians and Americans living next to Haitians in global community, supposedly as brothers and sisters in Christ, we see that we are all about the coveting and stealing that we are admonished against. We're taking way more than our daily bread. When we justify the systems that lead to those disparities by invoking God's favor, we're taking God's name in vain again. The commandments about stealing and coveting are very appropriate for today, World Hunger Emphasis Day in Community of Christ. Some people divide the first 4 and last 6 commandments, the first ones being about God, the last ones being about how to live with other people. The point is that it's our love of God that informs our love of neighbors. Jesus summarized this really well. So the God of the universe has come out on the side of the small and the lowly, overturning everything that society said about God being on the side of the rich and the powerful. God has intervened on behalf of the oppressed, the slaves, and as an act of pure grace, liberated them. They are now able to live with dignity. In Egypt, the midwives were ordered to kill the children. To survive, Moses had to be taken away from his parents. He had to honor Pharaoh instead. Living under tyranny, sex is used as power of the oppressor. Slaves in Egypt were surely no different than slaves in America, with women and men subjected to the sexual violence of slaveholders. But now in freedom, the Hebrews would have the chance to honor their own fathers and mothers, to build a culture of respect for heritage. This all relates to the causes of Black History Month that we've just completed, and it also relates to the effort to replace monuments to white supremacy. In that same spirit, people were to be safe from sexual predators. The law against adultery was also a law against sexual violence. So these commandments are given to reflect what God has been trying to teach about what freedom can look like. They're a gift to a free people to show how people can live together in liberty. What does it mean to belong to a community? It's not just about you, it's about being in relationship with God and with each other. There is responsibility and accountability. And in that sense, these instructions to a bunch of Hebrew men in the desert of Sinai 3,000 years ago are oh so relevant right now. As we discern the future of the church in Canada and around the world, may we build on such foundations. God invites us into God's love and mercy for the small and most vulnerable today. God invites us into loving and compassionate mercy for all of our neighbors, and especially for the least of these. The 10 Commandments are about our daily lives and our personal decisions. They are. Do I wear a mask or not? Do I park in the handicapped parking space when I don't need to? How do I go out of my way to show hospitality towards those foreigners and marginalized in our midst? Do I contribute to the food bank? Do I volunteer there? Do I dedicate myself to running it? Are our homes places where children are safe in honoring parents? Do parents reflect God's nature of showing mercy and compassion for the most vulnerable? It's about how my relationship with God impacts how I act with those around me. How I tend to my relationship with my neighbor is related to how I am with God. I cannot talk about my relationship with my neighbor without going back to my relationship with God, and back and forth it goes. And it actually goes well beyond little personal choices. It's about what kind of society we establish and how we incorporate divine love, compassion, mercy, and grace into our politics and social systems. Are workers paid a living wage? And can they afford to take Sabbath time off rather than having to work another job on the Sabbath day to survive? Is the consumerism of our society all about coveting the stuff that the marketers are peddling? Do we value raising executive salaries more than providing health care for all workers or for all? My prayer is that love of God and love of neighbor may be what we are known for. As we eat and drink the communion today, may we reconnect with God's compassionate justice and be strengthened to love mercy and to act justly with others. May that lifeblood flow through the veins of the church so that when people see the church, they might think it was guided by God.
Thank you, Art. I'd now like to invite you all into communion. In community of Christ, the Lord's Supper is a sacrament in which we remember the life, death, and living presence of Jesus Christ. Through partaking of the emblems, we renew the covenant we made through the baptism, reconciliation, and strengthening relationships, and commit ourselves to Christ's mission in the world. Others may have different or added understandings within their faith traditions. We invite all who participate in the Lord's Supper to do so as an expression of the love and peace of Jesus Christ, in whose name we worship. All are welcome at Christ's table. If you're joining us live from beyond our walls, and you have emblems prepared in your location, we invite you to partake alongside the disciples gathered here. If you're watching, however, this service recorded, we ask that you wait to participate until you can be with us live. And now I invite you to kneel in as much as you're able in your location facing the emblems as we go to Lethbridge, Alberta, where Doug MacArthur will read the blessing on the bread. Welcome, Doug.
Hi, John, and everyone else. Please join me as I offer a blessing on our bread this morning. Eternal God, we ask you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, to bless and sanctify this bread to the souls of all those who receive it, that they may eat in remembrance of the body of your Son and witness to you, O God, that they are willing to take upon them the name of your Son and always remember him and keep the commandments which he has given them, that they may always have his Spirit to be with them. Amen.
Once again, in as much as you're able, I invite you to kneel facing the emblems in your location as we continue in Lethbridge, Alberta, where Vickie MacArthur will read the blessing on the wine. Welcome, Vickie.
Please pray with me. Eternal God, we ask you in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, to bless and sanctify this wine to the souls of all those who receive it, that they may drink in remembrance of the blood of your Son, which was shed for them, that they may witness to you, O God, that they do always remember him, that they may have his Spirit to be with them. Amen.
Thank you, Vickie and Doug. And thanks to everybody who has made this service possible, to Leandro for directing the video, leading the choir, for translating everything into Spanish, to Christian Vago, who has translated everything into French, to Parker Johnson and Mary Jean Belrose, who are on the back end handling our live stream, all of the chat windows, etc., to Roger Dodson, who serves as the chaplain of our Zoom meeting and helps us set the tone for the service, and of course to Michael Karpowitz for his amazing ministry of music and his help with our audio. Here in Canada, we've been forced once again to cancel our in-person summer camping programs for 2021. Reunions are very much at the heart of Community of Christ identity and tradition, and so these decisions were made with a very heavy heart. This extraordinary time has caused us to experience everything differently, and that has also been true for our church experience. As we shared today, the ancient Christian sacrament of communion simultaneously in hundreds of remote locations spread across the world on all the inhabited continents and on numerous islands, especially in the South Pacific, we have had an experience that would scarcely have been imaginable a few years ago. And yet we now have the privilege of calling this experience routine. I hope that we can use this extraordinary time as a catalyst for reflection. We've been forced out of complacency by necessity. What have we learned about our lived church experiences? What are the essentials? 8 years ago, this congregation embarked on a discernment process with that same theme. What matters most? What is God calling us to be as Community of Christ in Toronto in the 21st century? Excuse me. We crafted a renewal plan, and Beyond the Walls is one of the direct fruits of that discernment. Our church president and prophet has called the whole church into similar discernment, and our apostle Art here has given the same charge to Community of Christ in Canada. Art has also called for us to invite and listen to all voices, all of the stakeholders who participate in church identity in Canada, not just those who attend congregations in person at 11 a.m. on a Sunday, since actually none of us do that anymore right now, almost none. We also want to hear from those who experience our shared identity through reunions and our camps, those who experience our mission through auxiliary charities like Encounter World Religions, World Accord, Zarin, and Cianido Social Housing. For those who have been engaged in some of our new, and also from those who have been engaged in some of our new invitational ministries, including creating connection groups. We want to hear from our elders and from our youth, from those in urban, suburban, and rural locations, Western Canadians and Eastern Canadians, Francophone, Anglophone, First Nations, immigrants, those of all gender identities and expressions. In short, we want the conversation to reflect the rich tapestry of the Community of Christ experience in Canada as we discern together what God is calling us to be in this time and place. We've heard from some of those voices today. All of our ministers today in the service are Canadian, and we'll chat a bit about this All Voices initiative with them and with Art after the postlude. And so I invite all of you to join with the Beyond the Walls choir in singing our closing hymn, number 263, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
singing. What though the tempest loudly roar? I hear the truth is living. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the light is giving. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to the rock I'm clear, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? The peace of Christ makes fresh my heart, a fountain ever springing. All things are mine since I am His. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to the rock I'm clear, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing?
Thank you. That's amazing. The choir gets better and better. As you go forth, listen once more to the voice that echoes across eons of time and is spoken anew among us this day, and hear God's guidance in Doctrine and Covenants 162, verse 8a. You are a good and faithful people, but sometimes you fail to see the power that is resident in your own story and fellowship. Look carefully, listen attentively, and sense the Spirit among you. Amen. Thank you, Mike. Remember to stick with us after the postlude, and I'll talk to our ministers, and we'll hear a little bit more about what they're up to and All Voices Canada.
Thanks, everyone. John, I see you are at your post already.
I've made it. Oh, wow. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for your parts in the service. I love seeing all of your faces and also having heard every part of this overall theme and message and everything that happened today. I want to say hi, first of all, to Eloise and to Amy. I want to say, Eloise, your French is magnificent. So, and what is the, can you tell us a little bit about, so you have a bilingual family and you're are you in like an immersion school, or how does things work?
Where's Papa's family from? Where do we have family?
Quebec.
In Quebec.
Very
What
good.
city in Quebec?
Montréal.
Montréal. Et est-ce que tu vas à l'école en français? Oui.
Oh, fantastic. So that's about as Canadian as you can be then, to have this wonderful blending and have perfect bilingualism, and that will also be very helpful if you go into all kinds of different employment in Canada, where that's just really, really vital, or politics if you're going to be prime minister someday. So that'll be fantastic. I want to ask a little bit about the book club too. I know that, for example, one of our young members, we only have a handful of kids in the Toronto congregation locally, and one Faith has started attending, I think, and so so I know you expanded it to Ontario. How do people get involved with it? And did we share the links?
Yeah. So for the idea of the group is we do want to keep it fairly small. So between 5 and 10 participants is ideal, so that we can maintain an interactive sort of program with the kids. But we did share the links, I believe, of the program that was developed in Independence, and that from the resources that we're using. And we're certainly looking for participants across our Canada East mission to join us. So if anyone is interested, I think my email address was shared as well. So I would love to connect with those people. And if we continue growing, then it would be great to start some more groups.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to be doing this, because this is something that, anyway, we've been feeling the need for it like a lot this entire time. And as you've said, it's really difficult. We've started whole giant intergenerational programs with only a handful of youth, because that's what we have. but it's so neat, this kind of the fact that we can now consolidate because nobody's doing it in person right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's exciting. So we're looking forward to seeing how this grows and develops. So
yeah, well, thank you so very much. Thanks both of you for being here.
Thank you, John.
I want to say hi to Brian as well. Brian, I know you apologized to us for a downer in terms of the story, but on the other hand, it is so important. I mean, so when we see these things, especially we're in this new era, 21st century level of technology. It was only, in terms of the World War II. World War II was the first time that something of that scale could have been done the way it was, with the technology at hand, which is horrific. But now the level of stuff that is possible in terms of state power and the assisted by technology is just unthinkable from what existed in the past.
Yeah, that's right. The Chinese government is really innovative in the use of technology to be able to watch everything you do. Even for the rest of the Chinese population, there's a kind of social credit score that they're implementing where, if you question things or something, it hurts your score, and then you might be banned from travel or access to university. And it's so scary. They're exporting it, like other totalitarian states are learning from the Chinese government. It's the Uyghurs are the place where it's being done, the most and the most oppressive. But it's just terrifying. It's truly terrifying.
Well, and that's something that obviously it's not only therefore affecting them, but it has the potential to affect everybody in the future, as, like you say, these ideas and techniques get exported, and anything is possible as enemy governments fall into being less free and these sorts of things.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
I want to ask also about the encounter in the Discovery Week. I didn't ask you about it beforehand, so I don't actually know the answer right now, but I know that last year, because of the shutdowns, that was the first time the Discovery Week was done virtually, and I know you had lots of people attend, and it was really, in that sense, really quite wonderful. What's the plan this year?
Yeah, so we decided to go online again. We figured we had to. So it's May 2nd to 7th. We're just about to kind of really launch the marketing of that. So it'll be 6 days, a Sunday to a Friday. It's probably around 3 hours a day, but the sessions are taped. So like if people doesn't fit their schedule or it's too much in one day, they can watch it later. So, you know, like a hour and a half, 2 hour class, and then an hour with a guide kind of doing Q&A. So that's the plan. I'm still trying to figure out if I can, you know, squeeze something in live before the end of the year somewhere, if it's a weekend or something. But for now it's going to be online, which does have benefits. I had people last year attending from England and, you know, Alaska, and, you know, they could get up and do the class and go back to work. So it has the, you know, the pandemic giveth and it taketh away.
Yeah, so at least there's that silver lining. And so, I mean, even if you're not quite launched that, but people can be checking by following the website, which is worldreligions.ca.
Yeah, that's right. And it is up. You can go and look at it right now. Yep.
Okay, so worldreligions.ca, and maybe we can also put that link in the chats for people.
That'd be great.
So you can do that. Fantastic. I want to say hi to both. I guess I'll say you can't both talk at once. Maybe you can. I don't know. I'll say hi to Mel first. Hi, Mel. Thank you for coming on to Beyond the Walls. And I wanted to ask just about your congregation. So what has been the experience for Barry as, anyway, during the lockdown? How have you guys been experiencing the church?
It has been quite a challenge. We have quite a few folks that just don't connect online and or don't have the means to connect online. We're quite small, and you know, then we have some other folks that are teachers, and it has just been such a tumultuous time for them that by Sunday there is just no room for anything else. So a lot of Facebooking and emails and that sort of thing seems to be the best we can do right now.
All right. I'm sorry to hear all of that. I know that that's been true for so many of us everywhere, and we wish the congregation, you know, all our best as as we start to hopefully begin to emerge out of this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say hi also to Troy. Troy, it's great. We used to be able to see you quite regularly in person, and it's been a long time, or, you know, more than a year now, right? And anyway, I know that part of the thing in terms of creating connection has been, though, kept alive through doing all sorts of very successful online activities. And I wonder if you might share some of what creating connection is doing and you're doing in leadership there.
Thanks, John. And as Brian alluded to, and we've talked about throughout the service, is the opportunities that the pandemic has created and what's emerged has been fantastic, because some of our connection groups, for example, in Barrie, we're kind of small, meeting in person, but when the pandemic hit, it was you know, we don't want to, you know, shut down what we're doing if it's possible. And so there was encouragement for some of these facilitators to try bringing it online, which they likely never would have even considered if they didn't have another option. So being sort of, you know, pushed in that direction. And now, for example, our weekly watercolor class led by a lady that we connected with through networking with other organizations in the community. When there was 5 or 8 people coming locally, it's now grown to 80 people every single week from all around the world, from the UK, from Wales, from Hawaii, from east to west. It's just fantastic. And for her, it's quite it blesses her, but also we're hearing stories from these folks who are attending just the guided watercolor, because she brings meditation into it. She brings some mindfulness into it. And we're hearing stories of this is the first time they've tried it. They're now displaying their art at a show. Their art's being asked to be used in social justice campaigns, and their doctors are saying how wonderful to hear that they're taking these classes. So that's just one example.
Yeah.
And now we're throwing an opportunity out there to sort of invite folks to build this dream team, to imagine the way forward in kind of a hybrid way, or what are some new ideas like the online Peace Book Club for the kids, and discern, as Art is talking about, what is the future in collaborating together with folks. So we're looking forward to moving in that positive direction.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, as we always, I think, are having to kind of step back and observe, there have been some silver linings, and that story at least is one that is, anyway, very heartwarming that has occurred during this kind of really rough time period. And I know for Doug and Vickie, Lethbridge is not during lockdown, is a small congregation and that has had some struggles in terms of how numbers, and I've been there a couple of times, and it's always wonderful to visit with you guys. So what are some of the things that you guys, what has been going on because I also know that Vickie, for example, also does some very innovative invitational things in terms of being able to lead mindfulness and other kinds of practices. And how has that been going in the past year? What have you been doing this year?
Well, I guess I can talk a little bit about the congregation, and then Vickie can talk about what she's doing and with creating connections and her own. We're a very small congregation, and it was after the pandemic hit, it was quite a little bit slow getting things together, but we meet every other week online, and Beyond the Walls is part of our practice now. So we try to meet normally on a communion Sunday. We'll meet after this service, but we'll have communion together. So we'll get online together in Zoom and do some sharing and some singing and share the communion together. And then on the off week, in the middle of the month, we'll all attend Beyond the Walls, and then we'll meet afterwards for some meaningful sharing. There was a time in the summer, and we hope as the weather gets better where we can meet outside together. But we're a small group, so we're continuing. Some people are struggling with technology and that, so there's but we're trying to keep connected, and it's definitely making us think about what's next for us, and to discern that, which is a really, really important question. But I feel like there's opportunities for us.
I'm happy to hear that, and that's very optimistic. And I know that some of the opportunities are involving, the kind of unique giftedness that is within both of you, and Vickie especially, as in terms of what I'm aware of, anyway. And so, how has that been going on, Vickie? How have you been doing?
Well, I'm so grateful actually for how these online tools have allowed us to expand and connect in new and creative ways. And I've always had a very dear yoga and meditation community here in Lethbridge that's grown through years. And I haven't always found ways of connecting it to my church community, but I found through the Creating Connection program in the West, that's directed by Deborah Donahue, and we have these weekly Nurturing Spirit afternoons. Last weekend, we just had a Nurturing Spirit online retreat where we had practices like meditation and journaling, and then Doug and I also offered some singing and chanting from different spiritual traditions in the evening. And so it's like allowing us to reach beyond traditional congregation. And then the other program that I'm part of is Awakening Spirituality, which is another outreach program directed by Tina Heathers. And it is this idea of really being open to the different ways that people connect to spirit that sometimes aren't as well accepted within a church community. And so looking to have places of belonging for all people. And I'm just so grateful for our whole church community that is so willing to be open and expand the walls that some churches put up. So just very grateful for all of you and this wonderful church that is discerning into the future. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank both of you for your willingness to be on. And I hope we can have you back. And I mean, Vickie, we've had you before in terms of leading meditation. We would also like to explore more of that going forward. And also, anyway, we like to have everyone back on, but we especially like to talk to you both about that. And as you mentioned, Awakening Spirituality, we don't always check in, but I thought we talked to Mary Jean just quickly if she is willing to. But I know that you're, I think you're the financial officer of that as an emerging congregation. And how has that worked in terms of you're essentially functioning as an online congregation or an online emerging congregation because it hasn't been in person, right? Or has it?
No, it hasn't been in person, not yet. We hope to at one day, have some events where we would be able to gather, but because all of our members come from so many different places, it's so much easier for us to gather online anyway. So it's been, like everybody's been saying, it's been a gift that way. So just so many talented people, so many people who have found, different ways to express their spirituality and to be able to share it. It's just been a rich, experience of sharing together.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you always for all of your support of this ministry as well, and for everything that you're doing in the church.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'm so happy to see Cindy and Doug. Cindy, we haven't had you on before, and I know I've got like a guest room in your place so I can come and visit. And I've been upset that I haven't been able to be there in a year. So
us too.
So I know your congregation is doing something pretty exciting since you're right now in the midst of building. In other words, building the interior out of the new facility in downtown Calgary.
Yes, and my husband couldn't stand to let me have the spotlight on that, so here he is.
I got to tell you, Art, the main reason I had to pop in is because after our ordination service last February, I got a lot of grief afterwards. People said, well, where was Cindy? And we didn't see Cindy. And I said, well, she was literally sitting feet away from me. So I thought you should know that I was supporting Cindy today and that I was indeed right here. But
please tell them.
And the other thing, I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but John, I think you really miscast Doug MacArthur, because he would have made the perfect Moses today with that great beard.
I know, I haven't seen that before. It's amazing.
Just as an aside. No, to get on to the matter at hand, Cindy and I went down to the new site yesterday, and all the wall framing is in, the electrical and plumbing are all roughed in, and they'll be putting up drywall soon. So we're pretty excited. And we're going to be making decisions on technology and AV and stuff in the next 2 weeks. And we are very much motivated to be able to have the same capabilities that Center Place has, so we can kind of be a technical support. And this whole Beyond the Walls experience has really reinforced how great this technology is for connecting the church on a very wide basis, and how different congregations can support each other. So we're going to do our best to complement all the capabilities that Center Place has. So that's it from me.
We are so excited for that, and we cannot wait, to be able to build on that partnership. And I know that when you guys are when it's built out and you are ready to do that, we'll definitely have a co-host Beyond the Walls so that everybody can have a virtual tour. And we're looking forward to, anyway, this emerging fruitful partnership with our sister congregation in Calgary. So we're so excited.
Same here.
Us too.
Well, Art, we had talked a little bit about this idea that you've been talking to people about, All Voices Canada, and you've now heard a bunch of Canadian voices. And I think that you've really gotten the conversation going. I think that this has been quite a wonderful, we don't have everybody represented, but young and old and East and West and different ways of approaching spirituality. And so there's a lot of conversation that's already emerging.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear all the voices here today in different languages and from different different situations. And really, yes, even as President Veazey has challenged us to engage in this discernment and this conversation, and as I have tried to launch that conversation in Canada, and really counting heavily on you, John, and Parker before you, kind of in the on the communication and helping us to kind of lead into that conversation. Obviously, I recognize this is not a conversation that we just thought of, hey, what if we could get people to think about the future of the church? Obviously, that conversation is a conversation that's ongoing. And I know when I was out participating in the Canada West Mission Center conference, well, and I say when I was out there, I wasn't out there. I mean, I was here, but out there participating in the Canada West Mission Center conference. And I sitting here thinking about wanting to get this conversation really going. Sessions that I was in, that Steve was leading on metamorphosis, that Deborah was leading on creating connection, really just helped me to realize people are deeply engaged right now in thinking about what's next and the future, and how do we live into a meaningful, relevant future for Community of Christ. And like you were saying at the close today, I mean, the pandemic has helped, I think, nudge us in kind of just pushing us out of our comfort zone and getting us thinking about some things in new ways. So I'm excited about that. I know we've been talking about some activities, and I think we're looking forward to, there's not a date yet, like a definite date, but a Saturday in May, we're looking at having a kind of all across Canada conversation, with different kinds of people engaging in different ways to be able to discern and reflect and share and lift up, share voices together. So watch for that coming in May. And then there will no doubt, there will be other opportunities then after that. Between now and May, of course, keep talking and keep discerning and thinking and reflecting. And certainly I would encourage groups from Lethbridge to creating connection groups to any groups. If you're looking for something to do and you'd like to create an opportunity to engage in some conversation and reflection and kind of be continuing on in this task of thinking about the future of the church, especially in a Canadian context, I say for we Canadians here today, but certainly I would encourage you to do that. And feel free to share with me, email or on social media, or give me a phone call. I'd love to visit and hear reflections. So.
Fantastic. Absolutely. And I'm excited for all of the different things that are happening. I mean, it's not just in Canada, but all around the church, there's exciting things that are emerging, but we're, going to try to cultivate some of those here, and certainly continue to promote them on Beyond the Walls and that sort of thing as we move forward. And one last thing I want to thank you about, Art, is the ministry that you brought today. I really felt like from our statement on Scripture, the ancient words of Scripture become revelatory and new when responsibly interpreted and faithfully applied. And I felt that so strongly in this thing that we all know, the Ten Commandments, and yet responsibly interpreted and also a call to apply faithfully. This idea has really made it seem revelatory and new in the 21st century, understood in ways that maybe we had never heard it before.
It never ceases to amaze me how we can go back to a text that I don't know when the Ten Commandments first emerged. The traditions are very old, and the idea that we can find meaning in those today is fun and strangely inspiring. I mean, I like the idea that somehow we are connected with those ancestors, with those people of other spiritual traditions and pathways. And if we're connected with them from 3,000 or whatever years ago, maybe we're strangely more connected with our neighbors and people around the world right now than what we would commonly think. So it's fun digging into some of those old classic texts. I'm glad that it fell to me to get to kind of try to connect with those today. That was fun.
Thank you. So I'll ask Leandro if there are other comments that folks have had, or I know that people probably want to get their location filled in on the map.
Yeah, we have a lot more locations for you, John, to add to those maps. So you'll be busy next week. So thanks everyone for letting us know where you are today. There's a lot of comments about the sermon. People are asking for a transcript, so we'll see what happens with that. Lots of comment about the beard. It was so yeah, it seems to be happening out west. You're not the only one, Doug. So that's all I have for now.
All right, well, very good. Thank you all again. This was amazing. I wanted to also say wave and say goodbye to everybody. Unmute and wave and say goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, John. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take good care.
Salut, Eloise. À la prochaine.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.